Thank you for doing this with me today. I think this is going to be valuable to a lot of people. It is so hard to write about yourself and to distill down what you do. I can tell you off the bat that my idea is that we change the banner to be reflective of Recruitomics, Collaboratory, and Blue Sky, tie it all in under the experience side. There's that, or let's just take a quick look at how I did it. My banner is a little bit broad for me, industry specific image, generic aesthetic. I put that I'm a scientist, I'm a biotech talent strategist, entrepreneur. I'm talking about my strengths and my interest areas as opposed to companies specifically. And then I'd like to have a quote that speaks to whatever my interests are as well. We'll have to take a little time in Canva to design this. Canva has some really nice templates for LinkedIn banners, which is nice. One way to pull in your experience is underneath your name. On the headline there, I have the companies as well. I love that headline section. And I think that is one of the most underutilized features of LinkedIn. A lot of people just put their title and that's that, and they call it a day. It's really helpful, especially to people browsing LinkedIn, to understand more holistically who you are and what you bring to the table. And so that's a really good place to use that. Unfortunately, at the top where you see it says Recruitomics Biotalent Consulting, you can only choose one current company, even if you have multiple current companies. I don't think it's unusual for most people or for many entrepreneurs to have a few different irons in the fire. Especially we see this with consultants a lot too. If they're consulting for a few different companies, they'll have to figure out how to list those. So often they'll put their own consulting company and then they'll list out the client they're consulting for under the experience. Okay. I really like that. I actually don't think I have that on mine. We could do a little exercise. I actually think ChatGPT is really great at helping brainstorm this because I personally get a little bit stuck when talking about myself. One thing that you can do is put in some of the details that you do want to capture in that headline, and we can have ChatGPT actually brainstorm 10 different headline options that you can pick and choose from. That's a really nice way to get the creative juices flowing. It's so much easier to do for someone else, to be honest. All right. Got ChatGPT pulled up, ready to go. So just a quick tip for anyone watching. If you do pay for the upgraded version of ChatGPT, you can use the PDF Reader plugin. You can actually take your current LinkedIn profile, download it as a PDF and stick it in there. And you can use that as this framework. So what we're going to do for yours instead is go back to your LinkedIn and we're basically just going to copy the whole thing. Doesn't need to be formatted, doesn't need to be fancy. The problem is it's going to copy some of the stuff on the sidebar, which are the people. That gets a little bit dicey. So you go down to the experience section and you copy from there, you're going to have a lot more luck. Perfect. And so you can just take that right over to ChatGPT, and then scroll up to the top and we're going to put a little preface in there. In the prompt window, you can say, I'm trying to refine my LinkedIn profile. Can you suggest 10 possible compelling headlines that I might use based on my experience? All right. So this is where I mix and match a lot. So I love the format of the vertical slash or the vertical separator because I think visually it's really nice for people to see you separate out things on your headline, and you can make your headline quite long, but it's not confusing. What I do is look and see what makes sense. I love empowering professionals in biotech and tech. That's pretty neat. But I might choose part of number two, right? I would take the slash out. If you use number two, chief operating officer, I would take this vertical line out from between that and Recruitomics. This is the formatting. So you can play with it and make it clear that between each of those vertical lines, that's a thing that you do. So you can put COO Recruitomics. You could put co-founder Collaboratory. I also like making it a little bit specific. So you can play with this afterward and think about how you could stitch those together into some compelling things. I really like not just putting the company name, but putting a little snippet about what the company does, if that's applicable. If you were the founder, co-founder, you are running a company, then you want to talk about what the company does. If you are an employee, then you want to talk about what you do, what you bring to the organization. So in that case, we see for our scientific candidates, for instance, they're going to say something like innovative biochemist at XYZ company. That's where they're taking their title and the company, and they're saying what they're bringing to the table. So in your case, you're going to want to say what the company is bringing to the table. Okay. I like that. I like that in yours, it's a strategy business, it's super clear. Those are like your top skills and that's your real focus. Yeah. And then underneath that, where it says talks about,
Those are things that are pulled in from what you're normally sharing and posting and things like that. What's really useful as a job seeker or as someone putting themselves out to the LinkedIn world to be seen is as you are talking about things and commenting on things, make sure that you're putting in hashtags on the things you want to be known for talking about. If you're a candidate and you want to be known for talking about your thing, make sure you're commenting with hashtags. It doesn't take long for LinkedIn to pick up what you are commenting on and what you're putting out in the world. So you want to add a summary. And again, I would recommend working with our good friend and brainstorming partner, ChatGPT, to think about what that summary might be. This is a short summary and it can be bullet points if you so choose. It can be a paragraph. If it is a paragraph, it needs to be a short paragraph. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is looking for an expert on something. Make it super easy for them to understand what things are. These are my strengths. This is what I bring.
Should we flip over to ChatGPT and see what it comes up with?
Sure. So what you can do in there is you have to actually format it outside of LinkedIn if you want any special formatting. But I think we can paste it in there.
Right. Using the initial information, main strength of summary for LinkedIn. How about that?
Sure. Let's see what it gives us.
Really long. I probably should put the word count limit in there.
That's okay. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's say thank you. Then say, please revise this to be a short 3 to 5 bullet list.
And let's see what they give us. Here's your scroll of your experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So if you liked that, which I recommend tweaking it and putting it in your voice and all of that, what we could do is take that and just copy and paste it and let's see if it's still accepting bullet points format. You may have to format it in a Google Doc or something like that with actual bullets. So that's the only limitation there. You can always come back and edit it further. So if you wanted to save that and see how it looks on your profile,
Okay. We can start here and then I can always go back and edit.
sounds good.
Everyone's going to get 100 notifications that I've updated my profile.
Oh, that's a really good point. Let's actually put that to private. So go up to where your face is and go to settings and privacy. And let's just toggle that off so that we can edit as much as we want and nobody will. So it should be in visibility. And then I always forget I don't do this often enough. I always forget exactly
Profile updates.
Yeah. So toggle that off and then they won't get the notifications. Let's see how that looks with your summary. Okay. So now going down to your experience section, here you'll want to recreate these into those bullet points. So this, I think, is another place where you want people to just get really quick hits. This is what I do here. This is the company's. So in your case, what's the company's value proposition? And what do you do there? This is where you can bring in what your role is in each of the organization. Now, there's a really interesting feature. So scroll down to skills. This is new. If you go to edit your skills, now when you add a skill in, so let's go ahead and edit that event planning, for instance. Now you can list where you did it. So you can select from your list of experience and you can check off each place you did it, which actually is so amazing for people looking at your profile. So for us on the recruiting side, looking at a candidate's skill list, it used to just be this long, unformatted list of skills. And now we can see, okay, they use these skills at the last 4 jobs. That's really interesting. Or they have a skill that seems random. And then we realize it really only was at an earlier job. You're not going to come up and get outreach for event planning jobs. So it actually is nice because the fact that you did event planning is, you should definitely advertise that because there's a whole skill set involved. And no doubt you could go back to that. Is that your passion today? No. So you probably don't want outreach from recruiters saying, hey, I've got this event planning job that you might be interested in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what's really interesting and probably worth noting on this is I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't even know what I did with that planning any of these because that was really internship experience that I don't bother listing anymore. Right now, like I should just take it off because it's not something I would even.
Yep. So you can hit delete skill. You don't have very many skills listed. I think the max is 100 skills. We don't recommend putting 100 skills on there, but we do recommend putting 20 to 50. That's more for scientific candidates. I don't think probably you need quite that many, but you want to cover the list of the depth and breadth of your skill set. And especially if you're wanting people to discover your profile, because it's all keyword driven. If, for instance, you with wanting to get more notoriety out for collaboratory, let's say, you would want to be discovered for online education and professional development and things like that. So you'd want those sorts of things to be coming up for you.
Oh, and this is interesting. Suggested based on your profile. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So would you put it as educational leadership or just education?
I would for this one. Yeah, I think that's great because we're curating a whole community for developing people, right? Yeah. So you can have a lot of fun with the skills. So now that we have done that, let's go back to your profile. You can spend time doing this a little bit later, but let's now we go back to your profile or and scroll up to where you have your experience. And now what we're going to start to see are the skills listed under each job. So now you put educational leadership under collaboratory in there. It's pretty new feature, but now when someone's looking at your profile, it's just so easy. It's not this huge unformed list of skills. It's at this job. These are my skills. And I just think it's a really nice feature they added. Let's scroll on down a little bit more. And the next section is going to be your education. For some of our candidates, they're coming out of school and their experience is their education, right? They've done maybe some internships, they've done some projects and things like that. Just like your experience section, you can get pretty detailed under here. You can also list skills on that skills page. You could have listed your skills in your education. I would probably add just a little bit more under your VU, just a little bit more about your areas of interest, even like your motivations for getting a certain degree. That tells people what your interests are and how your brain works. I wanted to bring those up because they do show up now so much higher in the profile. They used to just be this list of skills with 100 skills at the bottom of the profile and not have any clue what that context was. They still show up at the bottom of the profile, but now it's a little bit more intelligible. Scrolling down to recommendations, a lot of people get a lot of recommendations. I would say as a recruiter, we don't look at those as much as other things in the profile. It's not a bad thing to have, but it's also not something that I think you need to go totally out of your way at getting. If you're very early career and you have a very strong recommendation from like a mentor that carries weight, definitely get that. They do show up as keywords in the recommendations. So if somebody does give you a recommendation, it is totally fine for you to help them write that recommendation. If you're asking for it and you want to highlight something and you say, hey, would you mind if I drafted a recommendation for you? You can tweak it, but I'd really love to make sure that we're highlighting certain things that are really important. That just builds on the body of keywords.
I think that's actually a really good tip for a lot of times when you're asking for a recommendation or something that you're asking someone to do. If
Yeah.
you even say, I'm totally comfortable like giving you a draft that you can edit.
Not only that, but it's in your best interest because you know what you're applying for or what the use case for the recommendation is, right? They may or may not know exactly what your end goal is. So if you work for someone for a year and an internship, let's take that as an example. You do a great internship, you're there for a year, you probably did a whole lot of things for them, but maybe the job you're applying for, asking for the recommendation is one of those skill sets. It's not really fair for them to have to write a recommendation about everything under the sun you did. Highlight this thing. And that's how you should write your recommendation. Very broadly, they did a bunch of things, and then this is the thing we want to pull out. Then on the interests page here, those are actually pulled very much from your things that you're liking and doing around LinkedIn. So this is not something that you can edit. As you see, there's no little pencil icon. But if you scroll through, so you've got top voices, these are some folks that you follow that have very large followings. So you can see that Mary has over 1 million followers, and that's why she's showing up there. You can look at all the top voices if you're interested. It sorts them by how prominent they are in the LinkedIn community and who's like up there. You've got Brene Brown on there. Under companies, those are companies that you're following. And then groups, if you belong to any groups. Again, these come up in the keywords and they're actually things that people can search against. So in LinkedIn Recruiter, and I would assume Sales Navigator and any of the kind of top tier LinkedIn programs, I can definitely speak to LinkedIn Recruiter. We have these as search functions. I don't know about top voices, but companies that people follow, groups that they're in, and schools. Those are things we can search against. And the reason we would do that is there are some really big groups. If someone was recruiting for a role and they thought, okay, there's this big group of people, if they're interested in this, they may be interested in my job or they may be interested in consulting for my company. We can search against that. So It's worth subscribing to some groups that are very targeted to what you want to be contacted about because people do search on those. So for candidates, if you are a biotech job seeker, there are some really big biotech job seeker groups. Go subscribe to those because we look at those. The causes, that's something you can edit. And those are, again, keyword searchable. And I would say I've probably never searched for a cause as a recruiter, but then I'm not a nonprofit recruiter. Like I would definitely think that if you are in the nonprofit space, flesh out that causes section because I bet people who recruit in that space are very much searching the causes.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even realize that was on there. This really goes to show that you got to stay on top of your LinkedIn.
And it changes, like the skills thing, that's pretty new.
Here's one of my questions. A lot of people don't have the benefit of sitting directly with you to do this. And obviously, at the collaboratory, we have the resources. You can sit with a recruiter. But what else would you suggest? We've talked about using ChatGTP. Do you send it to a colleague, a mentor, have someone else look it over, hope for the best?
A colleague that isn't super close to you is always, I think, the best. So somebody who understands your field and what you're trying to get across, but also is enough removed that they would call out, I don't understand this, or I don't understand this bullet point. This doesn't make sense to me. We have a free LinkedIn course and we update that as new things do roll out. I mentioned that we have the Ask the Recruiter events. Those actually went into the LinkedIn course so that people can learn from our recruiting team. But so I think the best thing to do is to get in with some experts. We are always open for that. Our recruiting team loves to dig into people's LinkedIn profiles. We do it all day. And if we can do it in a way that means that they're going to have a better profile than the ones we see, that makes us happy.
What about this? Here's a good question for you. So, I'm very behind the curve. Now, how do you suggest building up your followers? How do you engage with the community at this point?
That's a really good question because it is hard. My profile has sent emails and messages to something like over 50,000 people at this point. So a lot of those people reach out to connect with me because hopefully I've sent them a message that resonated with them in their job search, or they thought, you know what, being connected to somebody who's entwined in the biotech scene would be good for my career. So most of my followers are people who are working in the biotech space because that's how I came into contact with them. But what I did see when I first started this process is it's not uncommon for people to just make requests. You have a limit on how many requests you can make in a day or a week. So start with joining a group and commenting and being active in that group of an interest area you want to be. But if you join a group, just ask people to connect, reach out and send them that connection request. It is totally fine to be connected with a ton of people that are in your industry just for the pure fact that you want to be connected with people in your industry. You do not need to know them. You don't need to ever need to go have dinner with them or get close with them. So the larger the network you have, the better. And it's not weird to connect with people. It feels weird, but once you get out there and do it, you'll realize that like most people accept your connection request. LinkedIn is your public face. It's your resume. It's your professional presence online. It is not Facebook. Do not post personal updates on here. This is not the place to put your dog pictures. That's Facebook. This is the place to comment on social issues, to comment on professional issues, to congratulate and encourage people in your industry, to network. So that's how it should be used.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so I've got some homework to do on my own. This has been so helpful. I guess one last thing is open to. Does it help? Should people do it?
My profile is open to providing services. We definitely use it for the job seekers. I have some caveats to this. So if you put your hand up and say you're open to new roles, nobody at your company will see that. However, it is not some private secret thing because even one person at your company doesn't have a company associated with their profile or they've misspelled the company name, it won't link to that company's profile. If even one person at your company has done that, then they might see that you're putting your hand up and you're open to work. So use the open to work setting judiciously. A lot of times, if people are on the job market actively and it's known, that's a great thing. Or if they got laid off, we start there though. As recruiters, there's a filter. We do our search, we put our search in, and then we click that we want to look at all the people who have said they're open to work first, because they're just much more likely to reply. After we've exhausted that list, we'll then go through people who have said they're not open to work. So it is worth doing if you feel comfortable. If I were to put up that I'm hiring, which I have done when we are hiring, I have now instantly 13,000 people who will see that. So there's twofold. You can't just put it up and then be really quiet. You have to be posting things. You have to be showing up in their feeds for them to see your face because it goes around your profile picture like I'm hiring. So you have to be a little bit vocal when you do have that up. We get referrals all the time from them. So I would say use those whenever you feel it's appropriate. Just be a little careful about the open to work one if you don't want your employers to know that you're seeking another job.
Yep, that's really good advice. Okay, what am I missing?
There's a few extra things that you can put in there. I think you hit all the high notes personally. If you are brand new to the job market, you've just graduated college and you speak other languages, that's actually a great thing to put on there. If you're a member of a professional organization like Women in Bio or something, you could definitely put that on there. Honors and awards, again, this just depends on how old they are. So career break, we do see occasionally on LinkedIn. A lot of recruiters still rule people out based on career breaks. That should not be happening, but it does. And so if you have a significant career break and you feel like it might help your chances to explain it, then feel free to put that on there. Our team does not consider that when we're looking for candidates. So our team will ask you about it potentially during a phone interview, but we are not ruling people out at the profile review stage based on that. I cannot speak for every recruiter or recruiting company in the world. Life happens, pandemics happen, all kinds of things happen. And more, I do think that employers are recognizing that a more well rounded individual may actually not have worked since graduating college all the way through to their job. They may have done something else that was also meaningful.
So career break. So you can pick a reason, but you can put a description in. So I guess that's interesting to say during this time I took some Coursera skills or I focused on whatever. And maybe you didn't focus on anything because you were dealing with something that was taking up all your attention. But maybe that is a good place to throw some things in there that you want to highlight that really don't fall under a specific area.
Let's say you did take a break and you were a caregiver, either for somebody in your family that required care, children. And during that time, you also pursued some other activities that you want to highlight. Like perhaps you did take some courses or upskilled in this or that area. That would be a place that you can note that. And then that actually becomes something you can add skills to, just one of your jobs. So then you go down to that skills section, pop those skills in there. And then it does potentially reduce the bias that might be associated with recruiters scanning your profile and they see you took 5 years off. That could potentially reduce that bias.
Yeah. And I think it makes it easier potentially for you to talk about if you've already thought through, okay, how am I going to pitch this? What's this going to look like when people ask me, like, oh, what were you doing all this time? If you've already gone in, prepped, and you've said, okay, I know I did XYZ. I just know some people really anguish over that. And it
Oh,
really
yeah.
should be the case. People are allowed to take breaks.
They really are. And I think it's going to be more normalized. And that's exciting. How might you message different types of breaks? How might you talk about them? Sometimes just practicing your language so you're not nervous about talking about it and you're really confident in the way that you go in and you present, yes, I took a break and this is why, and this is what I did. And that sort of confidence where it doesn't feel like you're beating around the bush or like being nefarious about it, that and you're not, you're just nervous that they might be interpreting it in a different way. Sometimes it's all about talking.
I think that's really good. I like that a lot because if you're laid off, which a lot of people have been in the past and are right now, that's also has emotional weight to it. So I think for some people, if you can talk about it and practice it and say, yes, I was. And during that time, I also did XYZ. When you come out so strong, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just the fact that for whatever reason, we're humans and we assign shame and all disappointment and
Yeah.
all of that. But if you can just go in and feel super, yeah, here's what happened too. You know what? It was great because it gave me an opportunity to do XYZ and I learned this and that. And this was an interest area of mine. And that's why I'm interested in this company. Okay. For people who are like me and they're going to finish watching this and then they're going to go down and make their LinkedIn look just incredible. Saved a PDF, build a resume about this profile. What are your thoughts on any of these? Are these actually good building resume tools or what do you think?
Yeah, no, I never ever submit the resume that LinkedIn builds for you. We have a whole course on that. Save to PDF is really interesting. I mentioned a use case for that earlier in this call, which was to actually use it in Chat GPT it does download it as like a resume format. We use them, recruiters use them in our applicant tracking systems. Almost every applicant tracking system has like a LinkedIn, like a Chrome tool that we can go onto LinkedIn. We can press that button on our Chrome extension and it will automatically download that PDF and put it into our applicant tracking system so that we have something to search on and kind of rediscover candidates within the database. So that's why it's nice to have a nicely formatted LinkedIn profile, but it's never something we would ever submit to an employer. And therefore, you shouldn't submit it to us. So there's we have a whole resume course with a free template to just get your resume figured out. But LinkedIn is not a resume. It is an online version of your resume. And then send profile in a message. That's just an interesting little tool. We get spammed with this sometimes by candidates where they will send us their profile in a message, but there are some really good use cases for it. If you're networking with somebody and they say, "Oh, tell me about what you do," you can say, "Sure." You can give them like a high level and say, "Oh, and here's my profile." So it just is an easier way. You can give them your elevator pitch, 3 sentences or so, and then you can say, "If you want to know more, here's my profile."
Awesome. Awesome. I hope that my failure to maintain an updated LinkedIn helped other people. We're all in this together. There's a lot of technology out there, so it's really hard to stay on top of everything. But I think this is a really crucial one. For me, it's interesting because I'm definitely not looking for a job, but I am looking at other opportunities and other ways to get myself out there so it doesn't become irrelevant. And I think that's the problem is that I was of the mindset and guilty of the mindset of I'm not job hunting, so why would I even care about doing this? Now, first of all, things do happen, right? Economies change, things could happen, and so you should keep it updated for whatever reason. But also, say I want to speak at a conference,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, you want to see my LinkedIn?" Like, okay, like that's not great. The same thing as your resume. You keep it updated because you never know, and it's really hard to go back. I remember I let my resume slide and then I wanted to do an executive education course. I had to submit my resume. So then it was like 3 days of fixing that up and thinking about that. And you think, oh, if I just every 6 months or so gone in and been like, "Do."
It's true. It's a hard habit though, but yeah, that's a good point. I think even more than the resume, the LinkedIn, you mentioned if you want to speak at a conference and then you're like, "Oh, you may not even get the opportunity to speak at the conference if your LinkedIn wasn't updated because they might not have reached you out to even ask you. So you might be losing opportunities to be a guest on a podcast or be invited to speak at this or that because simply people don't know that you have that skill set. I think that's another interesting thing to note. If you aspire to be a speaker or you aspire to do something, you can put that on your LinkedIn, not in a way that is false or disingenuous. But if you want to be a public speaker, you want those opportunities, you can put open to public speaking opportunities as part of your headline or your summary, for instance, so that people who are looking for a speaker in one of those, if there's a conference coming up on entrepreneurship and they see that you are a co-founder and you're open to speaking, you might get more speaking engagements that way. So if you want to be something, put it on your profile as what you aspire to be, and you might get outreach.
So to be clear, do not, these are your only options here. I guess you could put under providing services if you really wanted to, but you're talking about putting it in this section.
Yeah. So if you are an established speaker and you have a speaking history, then you can put it on in your headline. If you are open to it, I would actually stick it in the summary section in those bullet points. And I would put that because it'll still come up in keyword searches and you're about, you could say something like open to speaking engagements in the following areas. And that's not disingenuous. You are open to those things. But if you haven't done it yet, I wouldn't put it in that headline. But as soon as you have, then yes, put it in your headline that you were a speaker on XYZ area.
Excellent. All right. I think this has been really helpful. I will put some time and effort into cleaning mine up.
Yeah.
Anytime.